Some of us remember old classic games that were obscure enough to only be known by very little of us, but yet be cherished back for the nostalgic memories for so long. Nostalgia is pretty much a way we repress bad memories from our youth into believing sugar-coated, exaggerated realities that we want to remember fondly. You know me, I am a Doom girl for 99% of the time, and also a boomer shooter girl, but little did you know I was also aware of other classic games I got into my hands by that time, especially the 90s. One of such games that got into my hands and I somehow cherished gleefully is a game from 1996 called Afterlife, developed by LucasArts back in the day. I was lucky that me and my parents, when stepping into a computer store nearby home, we'd sometimes receive a CD copy or two of probably the latest CD mix of the time, which was conveniently bootleg CDs containing pirated copies of classic DOS and Windows 95 games. And these CD mixes, compiled by an unknown hacker known as LeChuck back then, often include classics like MDK, Doom, The First Need for Speed, or even the aforementioned Afterlife. My now deceased mother enjoyed a lot of LucasArts games back then, such as the Monkey Island trilogy or even Afterlife, and sometimes even followed internet downloaded guides of such games to try and beat them. I mean, don't blame her or me. The point-and-click adventure games of back then were a bit obtuse with their puzzles and problem solving. But the game that most stuck out of all the LucasArts games we acquired was Afterlife. And Afterlife, reasonably enough, was a game that's so obscure, barely one YouTube review of the game exists alongside the tiny fraction of dedicated long plays and gameplay videos of such.
So, okay, why is JMAA talking about such an unknown, obscure game from the 90s? Why is she wasting her time with such a nothing burger? Well, two reasons really. The first one is that this game holds a particularly special place in my heart, and I'm not really sure that's just nostalgia taking over my repressed memories about how much I suck at this game, and I still kind of suck at it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Second, supply and demand, I guess. There's very little amount of YouTube videos, especially probably this long, that extensively talk about and discuss in depth about this very specific game, so I'm most likely slap tapping an untapped market here by covering this game. It's the last time I hear from vidIQ's advice this time, I swear. So because of those reasons, we are going to explore and divulge into this immense omnibulge of a game that was relatively mostly having a cult following for nearly 3 decades, and we're going to explain as well the history behind it and if it truly holds up to this day, and if it's as enjoyable as I remembered enjoying it. So strap yourselves in, because I'm going to do the best thing I can ever do in this sort of videos, spewing my words of my mouth for 2 hours. Why the hell would I say that?
So we have to properly introduce the main protagonist of this game's development, a LucasArts veteran known by the name of Mike STEMMLE. Mike STEMMLE was a computer game writer, designer, and director who co-created some of the LucasArts games in the 90s or early 2000s. Some of these works include being a designer for 1990's 256-color version of The Secret of Monkey Island. Other games he worked on before Afterlife was Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis in 1992 as a lead scripter, assistant designer, and programmer, and in 1993 Sam Max hit the road as a co-director and co-designer. According to an interview from the Retro Gamer magazine 2019, hold on, give me a fucking minute. Yeah, okay. On the Retro Gamer magazine 192 from 2019, STEMMLE admitted he was playing SimCity 2000 for a bit and came up with the idea of Afterlife after reading Dante's Inferno, whatever medieval fanfiction that is. By then, LucasArts was a rather experimental studio at the time, and allowed STEMMLE to launch the project based on little more than a 5-page outline and a lean budget, with 10 to 20 people working on it. It was also probably the last game that STEMMLE did any serious real programming for, much to his programmer's chagrin. The game released in 1996 around the same time than Quake and Duke Nukem 3D, more precisely less than a week than Quake. It had somewhat decent reception back in the day, scoring in GameRankings.com, now known as Metacritic, a near 75% rank based on 3 reviews. There's a review in the Computer Gaming World magazine issue 146 from September 1996, which is completely shilling Duke Nukem 3D in its first pages. I mean, there's the famous Doom Space Marine screenshot, as if the jab thrown to id Software wasn't enough. Oh no, John Romero is there promoting a Logitech joystick. Gaming journalism, everyone! There's also a review of Capstone's Witchhaven 2, and dear lord, it fucking rips it apart. Capstone, the pinnacle of entertainment software, I guess. The review states, aside of having an ad for Afterlife in a couple pages, states that the game's appeal is for fans of SimCity who like loves with their city building, rating at 4 out of 5 stars. Another review from the Game Informer magazine issue 41 from September 1996 stated,
"To call Afterlife a SimCity clone would be an understatement. It might as well have been a sequel or an expansion disc. It is, however, a good clone with lots of innovations and unique twists."
The game scored there a 8.75 out of 10, slightly below the Quake shareware. You can probably guess by now that despite the good, even decent reception the game had, it didn't sell as well as games like Quake or Duke 3D. According to Mike STEMMLE, the game was a commercial dud, obviously compared to other mainstream LucasArts franchises like the point-and-click adventures or even Monkey Island, and LucasArts, even at their most experimental, was interested in making a buck. The game most likely faded into eventual obscurity, and LucasArts at some point in the future near its death, until December 21st, 2012, when Disney fully finished acquiring Lucasfilm alongside LucasArts. The game was forgotten until probably one while later, and it was sneakily released on Steam and GOG, and still being the obscure game it is. Meanwhile, Mike STEMMLE, back in 2004, left LucasArts and started working at Perpetual Entertainment on Star Trek Online, later joining alongside other LucasArts veterans in February 2008 at Telltale Games, where he worked on notorious titles such as Poker Night 2, Tales of Monkey Island, and the first version of The Wolf Among Us. Let's forget that he also did Tales from Borderlands, because, frankly, I like to avoid Randy Pitchford shit in our channel for a while. According to his LinkedIn profile, however, STEMMLE ended up leaving Telltale Games back in May 2014 alongside Dave Grossman, who left Telltale too, according to a now extinct article in IGN. Today he works as a senior game designer in Penumbra Incorporated since June 2021, working on VR games. All in a while, the tight grip of Mickey fucking Mouse hoards the intellectual property of Afterlife.
Okay, so you can tell Afterlife and its creator had a convoluted history behind them as some sort of commercial dud, and it makes sense. Barely a few people on the planet know the game, and I'm mostly likely one of those few people who know the game, aside lazy game reviews. It is pretty much a cult classic, and with a cult following that not many gamers got to know, because it was pretty much in the shadow of games like Quake or Duke Nukem 3D. But the main question remains, does this game hold up to its quality today? Did it actually age well to this day? Is it any good? Well, to answer that question, let's dive deep into the setting of the game, starting by the very cover. I actually bought a big box of a copy of the game as a prop for this video. It's from Italy too, so at least I get something I can physically own regarding this game. My mom will be proud. Yet I still have to pirate the digital GOG copy of the game because I'm not funding Disney. Come on, you'll know my reasons why later in this video. Okay, for legal reasons, that was a joke.
The cover of the box clearly has the slogan, "The Last Word in Sims," which is completely not only a jab at SimCity in some way, but it also gives a copywriter a boner so immense he not only does not need Viagra, he also needs to go to the hospital immediately. The big box is conveniently covered in LucasArts puns and simulated humorous marketing blurb from the 90s, and it pretty much sets up the satirical tone of the game. You are the Demiurge, an artisan deity in a distant alien planet, presumably, who is sent by the mysterious powers that be to create the afterlife for the deceased souls of said planet, respectively heaven and hell, which is completely bound by the same moral and ethical conundrums of Earth's Western Christianity. you are accompanied by your two advisors from Hell and Heaven respectively, Jasper Wormsworth and Aria Goodhalo, who work similarly to advisors in SimCity 2000. There are going to be a lot of comparisons between Afterlife and SimCity 2000 for this video, so bear with me on this. By the get-go, you understand that the game has similar inner workings of that of SimCity, and it will be understandable because it seems here that Heaven and Hell go by the same earthly rules of capitalism. Their currency are pennies, which help you pay for the buildings and whatnot of the afterlife, and it paints a bigger picture when you treat the creation of the afterlife as if we were managing the politics of a city, considering most of politics are run by money itself. Your workers are either angels or demons, which can be either imported, as expensive as they may be, or trained within your afterlife itself, either in heaven or hell, to cheapen costs, housing them in conveniently named topias, all of this working like schools or universities in SimCity. In general, even when working the mortal planet itself to influence a belief system of your planet, you're treating the afterlife as more as if it was just a merely bureaucratic process of politics, where even if you have too many idle angels or demons, they start a literal Bolshevik revolution, just battle each other, destroying your afterlife in the process. But it is certain to say that the main course of the game is the satirical humor of the game, which is conveniently drinks a lot from the steady diet of Magazine, Crank, National Lampoon, and Spy. In the words of STEMMLE himself, satirizing religion itself requires a daft touch that even my arrogant 20-something self knew was beyond his skills. I was primarily intent on using the trappings of a very Christian afterlife to take some good jabs at people and things that bothered me at the time. The game has a lot, and I mean a lot of satirical humor in there, and it's on par to usual LucasArts business. I'm pretty sure by now you already seen the cheesy intro for the game where the doctor is more concerned about hitting on the nurse than to save an actual patient.
Live, damn you, live!
Doctor, we've lost him.
Damn! So, you want to go out for a drink?
Casual heterosexuality! There's a punishment in hell, which is basically a movie theater that'll hold you like Malcolm McDowell from the Clockwork Orange movie, forced to watch the worst shit on the planet. There's a place in heaven that's a business office with lots of benefits that is just perfect. There's even a place in heaven where you can even play Afterlife, the game itself, in this sort of Inception-style joke. If you cheat too much in the game game throws you a Death Star from Star Wars, obliterating your entire map, which kind of feels inspired with a Disney property. On one of the game's several fail states are the 4 surfers of the Apocalypso, which happen when you run out of money on the game or if you're just too bad with money. You can look into the biographies of these 4 surfers and they're written like in the Book of Revelations from the Bible that a child with a Day of the Tentacle skit. Jasper and Aria themselves even talk to you like you were their boss rather than a higher omnipotent being.
Good afternoon, Your Holiness, and welcome. I look forward to assisting you in your new role as Demiurge of this planet. My name is Jasper Wormsworth, and I am certain when you have seen the services I can provide, we can strike a deal that will be mutually beneficial.
Welcome, 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 boss. I'm Aria Goodhalo, and I'm your heavenly helper. Hiya, Wormy.
Look what the cherubs dragged in. We'll discuss my compensation later.
The planet itself and its living population can be either way influenced or to benefit your afterlife even, and it eventually goes bananas at some point, usually in the form of natural disasters, which is not usually good news to you to hear a disaster happen in a video game, but here it is because there's additional souls to your afterlife which can still pay rent somehow. And at some point, the planet overpopulates and discover technologies such as anti-gravity devices that let the inhabitants populate sea land above the atmosphere, or even advanced golf. I mean, this game has everything, holy hell. Like, okay, the game can even get Python-esque and throw you a bunch of gags and pop culture references, which makes this for a game that was inspired by Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, a medieval fanfiction where Dante, a demiurge, has to travel from hell through purgatory to heaven. You know it's real Dante when its most hated childhood bully Jimmy somewhere eating shit in one of the circles of hell.
Beatrice! Dante's!
Oh wow, an Dante's Inferno reference, that's incredible! There's one of the many building descriptions I like in this game, and most of the humor is readable in these building descriptions. It is a place in hell called sweatshops, which reflect a tiny bit of our mortal capitalist hell.
At the bottom of Hell's labor hierarchy are the sweatshops, which should in no way be confused with sweet shops. In these overcrowded, underventilated little industrial hovels, scores of slothful souls silently yet speedily sew sequins onto demonic loincloths or perform other humiliating tasks. If they meet their quotas, they get to sleep for a couple of hours and dream of a better afterlife. Dreams are encouraged in hell. They make the horror of the waking world that much more poignant.
You can also read into each individual soul's biography if you use the Soul Viewer tool, which soar to Pathanus surrealist heights. The satirical nature of the game is one of the most remarkable features that sets this game apart from SimCity 2000, but you have to imagine also that the scope of this game's setting is also greater than SimCity itself. SimCity has you merely controlling the politics of an infrastructure of a city on Earth, given to the rules of that early reality itself, of course. Yeah, maybe sometimes you can get an alien invasion or something like a kaiju attacking your city, but still, you're bound to the same reality as any other mortal human or sim is, and it kinda feels a tiny bit boring with all the human paperwork and the human taxes and the human money. On Afterlife, however, you are the Demiurge, a divine entity creating the grander scope of the afterlife itself, where the souls of the mortal deceased go to get their final rewards and punishments. If it wasn't enough with the humorous nature of the game, the bigger scope should theoretically sell the game itself more than SimCity would. The end result is one hell of an entertaining comedy imbued into another city builder, combined with the likeness of a god game.
But yeah, you can laugh all the time at the Monty Python style of comedy this game offers, and it surely brings good memories, especially when I come back to this game with a more mature mind that I can read complex words in a paragraph. But still, even though the comedy holds up, does the game hold up and age well in these circumstances? Because if we were just here for the humor and comedy, you might as well just watch a silly, entertaining YouTube video essay with pop culture references and the sort, kind of like the one you're watching right now.
The gameplay is similar to the one you'd find in a game like SimCity 2000, and that is that the gameplay is clunky and complex. Everything in SimCity felt like a bureaucratic process from what you can even see from the interface itself, from merely asking for a loan to adjusting your city's taxes. Hence, everything in SimCity plays like if you were doing actual politics in a city, with all its due policies, paperwork, and everything. Even the game itself feels more like a typical management software at the office than a strategy or city builder game, at least in comparison to other city builder games like Caesar 3, Pharaoh, or Zeus from the Impressions franchises of games. And that made SimCity a tad bit interesting to play, because in some way it'll make you feel like you're really playing a mayor of the city, someone important. This obviously in some way translated into other similar games like future iterations of SimCity or even City Skylines in the future, where it kind of feels like administrative software of a city. In Afterlife, it's kind of more of the same too. It makes you feel like you're the CEO of the Afterlife, controlling the bureaucratic software of Afterlife management from the interface alone. Shark mentality. There are scroll bars like you'd see in an Office Suite software Excel spreadsheet. There's a taskbar and a control panel with an Office software looking buttons, and even with the opening windows like the graph viewer or the minimap viewer are open like extra windows in an Office Windows application. There's a certain air of important bureaucratic business management in this game, even for the grander divine scope it has. The thing is that you're not just building a human city like in SimCity or building a public transit system like Transport Tycoon Deluxe. You're building that place where souls, good or bad, go to die in the divine plane and even influence the inhabitants of a mortal planet through sheer godlike powers. That is, if you have the sufficient money. The similarities between Afterlife and SimCity don't end there, however, as you can notice. In SimCity, you can land color zones respectively for residential, commercial, and industrial zones respectively. Here in Afterlife, you're outlining zones of the different 7 sins and virtues, plus a generic zone for all the 7, acting as a home of residence of souls, either in heaven or hell. The Afterlife still works under somehow the same Newtonian laws of physics, so you need to build roads, and you also get to build gates to the afterlife in a similar fashion to that of highway entrances to a city or in some city or city skylines. Someone has to enter your afterlife somehow, otherwise you'll not get those juicy souls that give you money. Common stations and tracks work similarly to a public transit upwards the city, in this case for souls who believe in reincarnation and just want to do so, because there's an important difference between permanently residing souls and temporary ones, just like there's residing citizens and tourist citizens in any other city builder game. Training centers and topias help you train angels and demons in your afterlife and not having to import more expensive ones from other afterlives. Kind of like the school system works in a game like SimCity, where it's less expensive to have homegrown employees than to have them commute and being imported from other cities. Saffron's work similar to energy stations, which can help further evolve buildings better. There are banks where you have to build them either in heaven or hell if you want to ask for a loan, and here's the thing, heaven usually has better loan terms than hell. And similarly to some cities' monuments, you can unlock gifts at certain population milestones which help to improve the vibes of either heaven or hell, more on that later. And I will not forget to mention the limbo bars, which are just basically a way to temporarily hold lost souls until you fix your capacity problems or so. I can't really find these at their equivalent in SimCity though. That's just probably an afterlife novelty. Even your advisors despises limbo bars because they're obviously a temporary last resort to patch out your afterlife problems.
Ew! Those things are so... Ew! I don't know why we allow them in heaven to begin with.
Frankly, I'm not too fond of them either. Hell loathes second chances.
Notice the lack of me of their complimentary gameplay B-roll using limbo bars because it's more convenient to just pause the game on divine intervention. I guess I have some dignity. Oh, by the way, I'm using it complimentarily along my own gameplay, the long play of some dude at YouTube who plays Afterlife like he was Factorio in a way that triggers my OCD and it really hurts. Oh no, stop! Ritalin can do amazing things to your brain. Anyway, remember how I said the gameplay of this game is clunky and complex? That's because it is. You don't only set up buildings depending on how much capacity you need for each thing, but you also need your buildings to evolve. And to evolve, there's many factors to take in mind, especially how buildings are micromanaged. Notably, next to your building descriptions, there's a button with a balancing scale on it, and this is where the clunky magic happens most of the time. You know, you could micromanage your buildings for automatic balancing so everything goes easily smooth without all the tedium, but that costs extra money that you probably need. Instead, what you could do is inspect each fate building and balance it yourself, generally tipping it in a way that the bar looks the widest as possible, indicating that the balance is more perfect. This is important to do because it helps your buildings be more efficient, thus be able to evolve further, and while this is tedious for the uninitiated, I can find this somewhat mesmerizing to do. It's the kind of thing a neurodivergent person like me with a severe OCD can do to entertain themselves in a game, but it's still kind of tedious. You have to still inspect each and every single building to balance it up properly in a very big way, where you don't even know what their symbols on each side mean. I mean, there's a brain and a strong arm, but what does that even indicate? Perhaps it is a way to represent how your angels or demons or even employees have to treat their work of that fate building, either by calculation or even by raw strength, kind of like an office job and a construction job respectively on each side of the scale. Don't get me wrong, if you still have plenty of money, it's still easier to macromanage fate structures in general or to be auto-balanced and let the money do the talking. But even if it's cheaper and a lesser scaled afterlife, macromanaging individual fate buildings can be a bit boring sometimes. You can also take into account the bias, either good or bad bias, which work similarly to crime in SimCity. In heaven and hell, certain structures can generate good or bad vibes. Generally speaking, you want the vibes coloring green on each plane, but there's a caveat. In heaven, you want the good vibes, and in hell, you want the bad vibes. Heaven's gates can, however, create bad vibes in heaven, like hell's gates can make good vibes in hell, which is something you don't want near fate buildings there. Does somewhat affect the evolution of fate buildings, which can also affect the future capacity these buildings have, which can avoid you having lots of souls wandering around losing you money. Not only that, in heaven you can mess up with confusing road designs in your souls, while in hell you can need longer, more messier road planning because you want the souls in hell to have a bad time in there. For these reasons and many more, you build heaven differently to how you build hell, and in the words of STEMMLE himself, he found building hell a lot easier than building heaven because ironic punishments are a dime a dozen. It's still a bit of a complicated mess, especially for those who are not ready for these sorts of games, but the most complicated part is especially keeping it in track at the same time with this planet the mortals are in. The hardest part here, according to STEMMLE, is to keep the game updating with a proper rhythm as the populations increase from hundreds to hundreds of billions in the planet itself, because guess what? The planet is going to evolve wanted or not. There's not only natural disasters on the planet like meteors or plagues, which always sound like extra money to your pocket that you can't obviously miss on, but the advanced technologically in expanding population, meaning they can trigger things like wars, nuclear holocaust, or even doing an oopsie with the gravity. And if you cannot keep up with that, which means that the eventual massive influx of souls, you might lose a lot of money. And if you're really bad with money, the Force surfers pay you a visit and send your afterlife bye-bye. For this reason, the supposed ideal gameplay is to start slow and in a smaller scope, kind of like you do in a game like SimCity, and from there, depending on the situation, you can slowly expand, but even then, you also have to keep in mind keeping a profit so you don't either way lose money slowly. Thus, people who know for this reason how to play this game perfectly. I am not one of those people. There is a special reason why the game can feel clunky and complex, and it's far easier to enter into the game's fail states than to actually enter a win state, because guess what? There are no win states in this game. True, there are technically an endgame situation when you unlock the Omnibulges and Love Domes, which automatically manage hell and heaven respectively for you, thus technically winning the whole game, leaving you with nothing else to do. But aside of the game telling you will reach such a population milestone to earn those, the game doesn't just end there. There is no ending there. You can still keep going and do whatever you want with it. However, there's a few fail states. In some cases, your afterlife goes awry. The four surfers I already mentioned happen whenever you go bankrupt and run out of pennies, but there's even more to it. Having an excess of non-employed angels and demons without being assigned to fate structures or similar can lead to idle angels or demons, and that is a problem. Because if you have too many, you trigger a battle between heaven and hell, which destroys your buildings too. Ah yes, never knew angels and demons are also subjected to socialism and worker unions. In this case, the game becomes unbearable to play. There's even a custom scenario dedicated to the situation, and it's incredibly jarring to play. Depending on the game's difficulty and how you play the game, you can also automatically or manually trigger bad things to happen. These work like the natural disasters in SimCity and range from a nose snorting all out of the souls from one place to another, a pair of dice destroying buildings or hell freezing over, to a demon guy disco dancing destroy your buildings. It's kind of mildly entertaining, but at the same time, there are nuisance to take care of if they happen, and it's an inconvenience a lot of the times, and you only manually trigger them from the menu if you're masochistic enough.
Like I said, this game feels a bit too clunky and complex to play. It would make it much easier if it were, say, accessibility options that enable the player to play like a breeze, and it's especially more clunky when there's no automatic scroll in the play map. You have to use your arrow keys to move around. Well, technically you can enable auto scroll, but it's still a bit clunky too. But maybe that's not the only factor to take in mind into this game. Sure, the game feels sometimes like a chore to play until you can probably play it nearly on autopilot or constantly generating eternal revenue. But I gotta say, the graphics are still wonderful to look at, and I have no idea how that can be a detriment to the gameplay. Isn't that right? Right.
I gotta say that for a game from 1996 with the standards of a 1996 DOS and Windows 95 game, that the graphics are some of the most detailed and beautiful examples of pixel art I've seen in a game of the period. Everything is detailed to the very pixel, and it has a very nice artistic influence to it. Even according to STEMMLE's words, it made him a little bit disturbed at what the artistic influences were. Another person who worked on the game was Kevin Evans, who was also a SimCity fan and worked on some of the artwork of Hell, often drawing upon the nightmarish works of H.P. Lovecraft, Clive Barker, Francis Bacon, Stanislaw Sukowski, H.R. Giger, and Czesław Belskinsky. If I butcher some of those names, I'm sorry, I'm not a PhD in arts and crafts. Evans also worked on the graphics of Outlaws a bit later for LucasArts in 1997, and is kinda a prolific games artist. Another of the people who worked at the game's world was Chris Hockabout, who previously worked on the Big Sky Trooper for SNES, and one of the most remarkable jobs at this game was artistically designing a city in heaven that's built on the head of a pin. He also worked later at Telltale on games like the Batman Telltale games as a lead designer, so even though whatever happened with Telltale, these people have talent at being prolific game artists. And it shows, because the pixel art and artwork in Afterlife is some of the most remarkable artwork made for a game in 1996, that assuming already got tired of the browniness of Quake. There's a problem with this though, a little caveat if you will. With this in mind, the pixel art is so complex that at a time of having a clumsy and convoluted Afterlife layout, it can be a real confusing convoluted mess and even an eyesore. From the overview, you cannot even tell which building is which, and how does it look unless you inspect it individually with a macro view, which is a real convenient shame because the art is incredibly beautiful and colorful to look at. Some of the buildings you can inspect though have this little eyeball icon in it and the bottom of the sidebar in the macro view, which lets you look at the artwork associated with them. And these are drawn in such a unique LucasArts art style that are gorgeous to look at. They even feel like a Saturday morning cartoon sometimes, like you can see it in fake buildings like Truth or Dare, or The Itch, with this one having a guy scratching his back perpetually with a LucasArts face on his head. It's a really cool attention to artistic detail that's sadly easily missed on how complex and convoluted some Afterlife layouts can be in-game, and I really wish how I could distinguish each building easier. There's an option to disable the buildings in the view to see the layout colors only, and it would be great if with that disabled when inspecting the color zone, the building where there just pops up and appears in the layout so you can see how it does look, like in the overview. It will be a tiny quality of life improvement, or rather, a quality of death improvement. Another problem I have with this game though, and this is more of a personal problem, is how the souls and emblems look in this game. They're fucking ugly. Ugh. They look like what if Abe from Oddworld and E.T. had a fucking child that was stung by bees. You see their faces on the Soul Inspector and they're comically but horrendously hideous. I get they're supposed to be an alien species outside our usual Earth. I get that their alien names on the lines of but even the dying corpse of the intro look better. I get that this is mostly for comical effect, but come on, this is just so jarring to look at. I somehow mistook these for demons at some point. In fact, they look more like my typical sleep paralysis demons. And I already had enough nightmares from my childhood with E.T. to have them with these things. These things popping out in the soul view in the middle of a road or fate structure looking like a complete ass.
You're ugly.
At least Jasper and Arya look nicer anyway. I could easily make a caveat about Arya having those wide puppy eyes, but that's not usually a problem. I think the artwork in general is on par with LucasArts standards, and that can be great. Well, obviously it could be way better still, but it contributes to the greater charm of the game if it wasn't for the fact that it could be easily mismatched with the whole confusing mess of the Afterlife's layout, as confusing as it can be. In SimCity 2000, you can easily distinguish each building from another at least, in a not confusing way, but the catch here is that the buildings in SimCity look boring. They don't have the flair, the colorfulness, and the complexity and creative freedom that Afterlife's buildings have. They're just mostly brown brick and mortar skyscrapers and the sort, kinda like the stuff you'd find in real life. In Afterlife, these buildings look more entertaining to look at, but they're easily lost in a sea of complex pixel art like that. But a plus of this game as well is the soundtrack. Yeah, okay, it doesn't have the funky tunes of SimCity 2000 most of the time. Jim Flynn forbid if Afterlife had a funk like that, but it feels not just fitting for an astral game like this, but it also feels relaxing and soothing because maybe because I enjoy more the angelic chorus and the Mongolian style throat singing that feels divine and holy. Some of the music as well is not just has Western religious influence, but it also has sometimes a more Eastern influence into it, kind of like it comes out of Buddhism or something. And this is coming from the fact that the game is mostly based on Western Christian religion. Even then, it's a great fit for the game.
A note that JMA forgot to mention is that the track for the Four Surfers of the Apocalypso has the same melody, than Dies Irae, and it's delightfully genius. Truly delightful.
Sadly, there's not much information on who was assigned the music credits, and it's not the kind of video game soundtrack you easily find re-uploaded on a music service like Spotify again, because this game is a commercial dud for LucasArts and even Disney. But even while I'm writing this very script, the soundtrack is soothing enough to help me focus on the writing. It's amazing and I love it. Just listen to it. This, alongside other boomer shooter soundtracks, is some of my favorite game soundtracks that I cherish from my youth. And if you're looking for an alternative to a lo-fi hip-hop playlist that has a religious, heavenly tone into it, just crank up this one. Maybe it even can help you sleep. Okay, so that's interesting and all, but how do you even play this game at all?
You'd already know that playing DOS on Windows 95 games on more modern systems like Windows 10 or 11 can be tricky a lot of times, especially 90% of the time. There are plenty of guides online on how to play DOS or old Windows classics on modern systems, not to mention better archive games like Doom have plenty of ways to play on a source port on modern systems, and I mean, just look at it. I played Doom on a plethora of source ports for Windows, and I just probably play the tip of the iceberg when it comes to those. But Afterlife is a rather obscure DOS and Windows 95 game, has fewer articles or guides on how to play on modern systems, if not barely just a tiny bit of them. This game again is a commercial dud for LucasArts and Disney, and even though it's on Steam and GOG, you can see them putting in there and slapping it with DOSBox to do it justice. You have to do some technical tweaking, which can be missed in the sea of Steam reviews.
I read a Steam review that explained how to play the game on modern systems on white with sweat screen settings on a high resolution, and that was a bit of an honest fair warning. The only problem is that by default, the game is run on the DOS version and not the Windows 95 version that you're supposed to on DOSBox. The DOS version, which is some of the footage I recorded for this game, is great if you want to preserve the experience for the old DOS game, but it doesn't work with widescreen or high resolutions from the one set by default in the alive.dos.ini file, otherwise it will crash. What you're supposed to do is run alive.exe, the Windows 95 version, with Windows 95 compatibility settings and have it modify the alive.ini file in the game files to modify the resolution properly in the configuration to a more fitting widescreen or even native or higher resolution. This will still allow you to play the game on a window, which for me is not a big issue, but there's some people encountering some glitches, even crashes, or setting up the Windows 95 version on really big screen resolutions, which I didn't encounter too much, but at least I got to record the later footage of the game on widescreen with OBS. But I think this is a problem of video game preservation, because when you release the old DOS games on platforms like Steam or GOG, simply slapping DOSBox on the top of a DOS game will not do always a minimally decent job, because DOSBox is not perfect. DOSBox is an emulator. A game on system emulators have their obvious problems of compatibility or game fidelity. It's like if Nintendo used an emulator to resell old classic Nintendo games, which, by the way, is a thing that already happens. The mini NES and mini SNES use emulators and ROMs to replay the old Nintendo games because of obvious problems of video game preservation. Afterlife has the minimal strike of luck of being minimally preserved by a handful of people who still play the game to its original state, even on modern systems. But it will be pretty much on the verge of being lost media because, again, it was such a commercial dot that it was shadowed by games like Quake or Duke Nukem 3D, or hell, even SimCity. Companies like Disney, when it comes to preserving old DOS games on platforms like Steam or GOG, just do the lazy cheap job of slapping DOSBox on their games. But games like these require more effort than that if they want to be preserved or even successful. I'm not asking obviously for a Night Dive tier remaster of the game, but all I'm saying is that if at least you keep the source code of the game or even reverse engineer the DOS or Windows 95 game itself, you should release the game in a way that's not uncomfortable to play on modern systems outside DOSBox or tweaking INI files and the exe properties on Windows. I yearn for accessibility like this, because problems like these is what stops a game like this to be successful in the first place.
So, is the game cool to play? Does it hold up to this day? Did it even age well? Well, yeah, sort of. Except for those particularities the game has, and even if the game is not for everyone, at least it's still enjoyable. Maybe the game can be too clunky and complex, but even then, I still see today women and children playing games like Hearts of Iron 4, so picking up a game like this for them might be a piece of cake in comparison. In fact, I'd love to see this game be successful once more and be recognized way more people as a hidden gaming gem from the 90s. Hell, the only game reviewer like this one at the time I'm making this video is from Lazy Game Reviews, and don't get me wrong, I respect the intent of LGR for that video, but it doesn't do justice to the game itself, because this game is an obscure gem that barely got out of being a commercial dud, and it's shown that it can be enjoyed by way many people that have had a proper re-release or even remaster that enables the ease of access to this game. Sadly, it's not that easy. I don't know where this video will go, even if anyone of importance will see it. I don't even know if the guy who sold me this big box of the game from Italy on eBay will see it, but you have to also consider the game was now owned by Disney.
Disney is truly an evil corporation, made of pure evil. If I were to describe the huge influence that Disney has to the point of being able to lobby governments all around the globe enough to get away basically with anything bad they do, I'd already state the obvious. Most they got probably is a tiny slap in the wrist compared to the huge sums of money they already have in their banks. Disney owns Lucasfilm and LucasArts, and at the same time, they have the IP rights to Afterlife from 1996, at least as their gaming branch of Disney Interactive. Again, I don't have any idea if this video will get popular enough to skyrocket this game to popularity out of obscurity, but I realized later that if that happens, I will be playing a Damocles sword in here. On one hand, I get way more people enjoying the game as it is and giving the game the recognition it deserves. But on the other, Disney, seeing how popular the game will get, will have a free reign over the destiny of the game, considering Disney a lot of times is pure evil. And this is why I said the totally obvious joke that I pirated the digital copy of GOG for this video. There's a potential timeline where we could see a Dungeon Keeper style Trashfire mobile tier game with invasive, massive, and predatory monetization based on the Afterlife franchise, and that's one of the many timelines you could have. And I'm afraid I will be contributing financially to that very timeline happening. Maybe we'd have Night Dive remastering this game properly, which is kinda weird. I've been begged on the subreddit about remastering the 1996 classic from LucasArts, but what that will be really tricky. Disney is not operating on goodwill most of the time. They will not be willing to offer a license to anyone to remaster the game to a company like Night Dive. Even they could relay that job to a crappy developer who only makes mobile game garbage. But just remember this. They operate under the constant need of making profit, no matter what, and if this game makes enough profit for once, it could lead Disney to a potential of making the wrong decisions for it. You could say they will sell the rights to the Afterlife franchise to a company like Double Fine or so, but that is even trickier because knowing a game like this will make easy profit, they don't want to let go of such. And for that, honestly, there's my issue option of letting go of this game and let it just remain in obscurity, even by complete accident. I know one of the reasons of this video exists is because of Isaac due to huge supply and demand, but sometimes we can have nice things from the past come back. Some of those nice things of the past even are surrounded by bad memories they're trying to repress from the past. After all, Afterlife is a complex and clunky game that will be hard to understand without looking online for a guide on how to properly play it. And that led me to a lot of frustration with the game itself. But at least we know this: Afterlife is now, no pun intended, in a better afterlife. In the case that it doesn't go research in popularity enough to be necromanced by the hands of Mickey Mouse, at least. And that should be cherished by the people who remember it.
The games industry is a mess. Not that it hasn't been before back in the 90s, but it was clearly more evident like that because more people notice, especially through the internet, a lot of the business malpractices the industry does on a regular scale. If Disney will release or re-release Afterlife today, it will be a gamble between being a complete disaster and being a success. The latter as you want to see, but it is more unlikely given the nature of Disney. And of course, if the game were to re-release today, with all the garbage social media has, it will call for the ire of so many right-wing Christians for its anti-religious, satirical nature. And it will be like that because Mike STEMMLE had it actually happening at some point back in the 90s.
According to the same Retro Gamer magazine interview, STEMMLE did sufficiently rile up one confused young man enough to send in a vaguely threatening letter. STEMMLE continues as follows.
But we get vaguely threatening letters when we change Max's voice actors, so that's kind of par for the course. In the end, I think Afterlife was too silly to get anyone's knickers in a twist, which is what we were going for all along.
Sadly, when it comes to confused young men like this one, these days there are more than that. You could easily see all the right-wing Christian sellouts online willing to harass or ruin someone's life over minimal things. You've seen the amount of harassment the developers of the latest Monkey Island game, Return to Monkey Island, got from minimally changing the aesthetic of the franchise, especially people like Ron Gilbert, who got really frustrated with the hordes of angry gamers discontent with a minimal change in the game's franchise's direction. If that happens on such a minor thing, imagine what will happen when the Christian right-wing cultists see a release of a game like Afterlife today, with all its too religious satire. Hell, don't even get me started on Gamergate even.
The sad reality of the industry is that especially these days, you'll not have literally everyone happy with a game. That's fairly obvious, but it's more especially evident when there's more people online gaming than the niche handful of people that were gaming in the 90s. But I think it's safe to say that these right-wing zealots can get fucked. It's just a fact that they're just a massive social vocal minority, and given some time, they'll eventually sometimes learn to appreciate a game like this creator did.
Zoning a 7x7 grid in a certain manner unlocks an Easter egg of the game called the Mother Shack building. There's a message outlining Mike STEMMLE's views on purpose, and I don't know if I can find footage of it, but it's pretty cool he did this. STEMMLE in the Retro Gamer interview reflected,
When I designed Afterlife, I was still a Roman Catholic, conflating my love of a good story with evidence of a divine creator. In the years since, I have transitioned to full-blown atheism. I still love a good story and believe that the stories we tell can shape the world, but I recognize that they are, in the end, only stories. For the moment, my interest in the spiritual is at a low ebb. I'm much more interested in the cosmic at this juncture of my life.
It takes a good amount of self-growth to realize that what the Bible mostly teaches you at this baseline is a load of rubbish, and that you will find the same kind of existential relief in a Harry Potter fantasy book. It's admirable to see a game creator grow as a person like that, and maybe the right-wing Christian zealots who lashed out at Afterlife could learn from him. Times in gaming change, and now there's more scrutiny to literally anything in gaming, especially from both sides, and it basically reaffirms my previous point that maybe at some degree, games like Afterlife should remain in obscurity unless they want to invoke the wrath of angry Christian gamers these days. But I'd like to say something, especially on behalf of myself and people like my now ages-old deceased mother. Mike, keep making good games. A LucasArts veteran like you could still be really talented and at making not just good stories, but also good games. And I like to say that also not just another LucasArts veterans like Ron Gilbert or anything, but also like to let everyone else know that from this, they can make a legacy and carry the torch that Afterlife left for us, and as a fellow game developer and content creator. And thus, I like to say, thank you, LucasArts. Thank you, Afterlife, for everything. Now I'm better going back to see how the analytics of this video goes. Bye!
Wackading hoy?
Burger King.
Adorable.